You know, this is a story that's really about fame, money, and control. It's about how a global superstar, for 13 whole years, legally wasn't in charge of her own life. Today, we're going to break down the case of Britney Spears.
I just want my life back. Just think about that for a second. Those were the words Britney Spears said to a judge in 2021. It's such a simple plea, but it blew the lid off a shocking reality that, honestly, very few of us could have ever imagined.
And that really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? How did one of the most famous women on the entire planet end up in a legal arrangement that stripped away her most basic freedoms? Well, to really understand the answer, we have to go back to the very beginning.
So, to get what she was fighting for, we have to remember the absolute global phenomenon she was before this whole crisis even began.
Back in the late 90s, Britney Spears didn't just show up on the music scene. I mean, she completely redefined it. From the second she arrived, she was just shattering records. At only 17 years old, her debut album sold over 10 million copies in its first year alone. That made it the biggest-selling album by a teenager, ever.
And it wasn't a one-hit wonder, not even close. The success was relentless. We're talking 4 albums in 5 years, all of them multi-platinum blockbusters. She was the first female artist in history to have her first 4 albums debut at #1. This wasn't just stardom, it was a full-blown dynasty. But with that kind of fame, well, it came with a dark side. The more famous she got, the bigger a target she became for this new, really aggressive and incredibly profitable paparazzi industry.
Just let that number sink in for a minute. 70. Not 7 photographers, a convoy of 70 cars and motorcycles following her every single move, every single day. The pressure wasn't just constant, it was predatory.
And that kind of pressure cooker environment led to this incredibly fast escalation of crises. All throughout 2007, you see this string of personal tragedies and very public struggles, all happening under the harshest media spotlight imaginable. It all came to a head in early 2008 with a court order that would change her life for the next 13 years.
Years later, though, she gave us a totally different perspective on these moments. What the media just labeled a meltdown was, in her own words, an act of defiance. It was her way of pushing back against a world that she felt completely owned her.
So, right after she was hospitalized, her father, Jamie Spears, was granted what was called a temporary conservatorship. The thing is, it turned out to be anything but temporary.
So what in the world is a conservatorship anyway? Well, it's a really serious legal tool. In California, it's typically used for the elderly or people with severe conditions like dementia who literally can't take care of their own basic needs. What made Britney's case so strange and so controversial was applying it to a 26-year-old who was still one of the biggest entertainers in the world.
And the control was total, split into 2 parts. You had the conservatorship of the person, which dictated her medical care, who she could see, even where she could live. And then you had the conservatorship of the estate, which controlled every single dollar she earned. Her father, Jamie Spears, was in charge of both.
And this is where the story gets just bizarre. This is the central contradiction, right? The court says she's legally unable to care for herself, but at the same time, she's working nonstop, releasing #1 albums, being a judge on primetime TV, and launching a Las Vegas residency that grossed over $137 million.
This chart puts that insane contradiction right in your face. On one hand, you have this massive revenue she was generating, $137 million, and on the other, the tiny personal allowance she was reportedly given, just $2,000 a week, a tiny fraction of the fortune she was earning for everyone else.
When she finally got to speak, her testimony, it painted this absolutely horrifying picture of what life was like inside this system. The allegations were just shocking. Being forced to perform, being denied the right to have another child, being medicated against her will with things like lithium, and being subjected to intense surveillance. We're talking bugs in her bedroom and her phone activity being monitored in real time.
For years, all of this was happening behind closed doors. But online, something was starting to bubble up. A movement was brewing, totally convinced that something was deeply, deeply wrong. It all started with a hashtag #FreeBritney, which at first, let's be honest, was dismissed as a conspiracy theory, but it grew into this massive global movement. Fans were analyzing her Instagram for clues, organizing protests, and demanding accountability. And their activism, plus these really powerful documentaries like Framing Britney Spears, finally forced the world to pay attention. All that public pressure started to create a crack in the system.
But it was her own testimony that just blew the whole thing wide open. That testimony led to her getting to hire her own lawyer for the first time in 13 years. And from there, the entire legal structure just quickly crumbled, and the whole thing was terminated in late 2021.
And with her freedom, she finally got the chance to tell her own story. In her own words, her memoir, The Woman in Me, was a bombshell. It completely reframed her entire public life, not as a story of scandal, but as a story of survival.
And the impact of her case, it goes so far beyond just her own life. Her fight literally exposed these deep, deep flaws in America's guardianship laws. It sparked a bipartisan push for reform. It led to new state laws to protect the rights of people in these situations. Her personal struggle created real, tangible change for others.
So, Britney Spears is free. But our story leaves all of us with a really tough question. In this age of constant media, where we feel like we know everything about these famous people, where do we draw the line between celebrity and humanity? Her case forced a reckoning, and that conversation is far from over.